The nightmare always concluded in the same heart-stopping silence, Emma's heartbeat fading to nothing, and Sarah's own heart fracturing into a million pieces that could never be put back together. At 4:55 in the morning, she shot upright in bed, the pillow beneath her head soaked with the tears that were now her only companions in the suffocating quiet of this Texas house. A soft scratching sound at the front door sliced through the pre-dawn stillness. Then it came again, this time more deliberate, more desperate. Sarah cautiously opened the door to see a German shepherd, her pregnant belly hanging so low it nearly scraped the ground. A trail of blood trickled from her hind leg, staining the concrete like crimson teardrops. The dog's piercing amber eyes locked onto Sarah's, and in them there wasn't just animal fear, but something far deeper, a flicker of recognition, of trust, an unspoken plea from one mother to another. The exhausted animal collapsed right on the threshold, her body racked with the spasms of labor. She nudged her wet muzzle against Sarah's trembling hand, gently guiding it to her swollen abdomen, where a new life was desperately fighting its way into the world. Please, Sarah breathed a silent prayer to the very universe that had stripped her of everything. Not again. Please let me save them this time. Before this story continues, please show your support with a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's return to the story. There was a time when Sarah Mitchell was the kind of nurse who could find a glimmer of hope in the most desolate corners of the Dallas Presbyterian Hospital's emergency room. At 35, she had delivered babies in parking lots, comforted the dying as they took their last breath, and battled death with a tenacity that had earned her 3 commendation awards. But just 8 months ago, her own body had betrayed her in the most cruel and unimaginable way. Emma, her precious daughter, the miracle she and David had prayed for after 5 long years, was lost at just 24 weeks when the placenta abruptly tore away. David, her husband of 7 years, had stood beside her in that sterile hospital room, looking at her like a complete stranger. The powerhouse corporate lawyer, a man who commanded courtrooms with ease, couldn't bear to face the depths of his wife's sorrow. "I can't watch you shatter like this, Sarah," he had said, his voice as frigid as the February air on the morning he had her served with divorce papers. "You're simply not the woman I married anymore." And just like that, within 4 short months, he had remarried Karen, a paralegal from his own firm, a woman who wore sharp designer suits and discussed having children as if they were corporate acquisitions. This small house in Willow Creek, Texas, population 8,000, was meant to be Sarah's sanctuary, her fresh start. Instead, it had become her cage. The nursery down the hall remained untouched, its soft pink walls a constant mocking reminder of all she had lost. The empty crib stood as a stark monument to her loss. She was getting by on her savings on an extended leave from the hospital, and on sleeping pills that never truly silenced the ghost of Emma. But this German shepherd, now bleeding on her doorstep, carried her own story of loss. This was hope, though Sarah didn't know her name, yet a dog raised its saint. Mary's orphanage, to be a therapy animal for children wrestling with trauma. For 2 years, she had been the unspoken voice for a little girl named Lily Chen, an 8-year-old who had fallen silent after witnessing her parents perish in a house fire. They had shared a language of invented signs, gentle touches, and knowing glances that the nuns could only call a miracle. Then 2 months ago, Hope had been sold illegally by a corrupt orphanage employee to a man who paid $5,000 in cash. That man was David Mitchell. But this truth was buried deep beneath a mountain of forged papers and calculated lies. Next door to Sarah lived Walter Hayes, 68 years old, a Vietnam veteran whose hands had once delivered babies in jungle camps, but whose own heart had shattered when his son died in Afghanistan. Rachel Carter, Sarah's best friend from nursing school, and now Willow Creek's most beloved veterinarian, lived just 10 minutes down the road, raising her daughter alone, and knowing some wounds never completely fade. These lives were on a collision course, destined to shatter, and then remake one another in the most unexpected of ways. The German shepherd's breath came in ragged, desperate gasps as Sarah knelt on the cold concrete beside her. 5 o'clock in the morning, and the world was suspended in that gray stillness between darkness and dawn. The dog's fur was matted with grime and what looked like older dried blood, not just from the gash on her leg, but from a dozen other cuts that spoke of a desperate flight through brush and barbed wire. Her belly hung impossibly low, the skin stretched taut with the promise of life demanding to be born. Sarah's medical training surged to the surface, breaking through the fog of grief that had held her captive for months. She could see the infected wound on the dog's rear leg, probably 2 weeks old, poorly healed, and torn open again by the journey. But it was the animal's eyes that held her amber, intelligent and piercingly focused. This wasn't the wild panic of an animal in pain. This felt deliberate, almost calculated. It felt as if the dog had chosen this door, this house, this broken woman. "Easy girl," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Her hands moved instinctively, searching for any hint of aggression, but found only a profound weariness. The collar circling the dog's neck was cracked leather, devoid of tags, yet the deep groove in her fur spoke of a bond that had lasted for years. The dog let out a whimper, a sound so faint and sorrowful it felt almost human, and laid a heavy paw upon Sarah's hand. Then, with an unmistakable urgency, she guided Sarah's touch toward her own taut, contracting belly. A deep rumble of thunder echoed across the vast Texas sky, and in that sound Sarah heard David's voice haunting her memory. "You're far too shattered to care for anything now." He had hurled those words at her the day she dared to suggest getting a dog, hoping to fill the crushing silence, to practice nurturing something living once more. He had laughed a cruel, hollow sound that had ridiculed the very idea. Sarah's gaze shifted from the animal in distress before her to the ghostly emptiness of her house. She knew she could call animal control. It was the logical choice, the safe choice. But safety had only ever deepened the void in her life. "Not tonight," she declared aloud, startled by the sudden strength resonating in her own voice. "Tonight we save lives." Coaxing the dog inside was a slow, delicate process. She needed a name, and hope felt profoundly right. The dog could hardly stand, so Sarah braced her immense weight, feeling the powerful muscles beneath the fur that hinted at a working dog's lineage, now seized by tremors of pain and utter exhaustion. Her living room would have to become a sanctuary. Sarah gathered every towel she could find, carefully arranging them into a soft nest on the cold hardwood floor. From the back of the hall closet, she retrieved the medical supplies from her hospital days, things she could never bring herself to discard. Sterile gloves, rolls of gauze, antiseptic, and even the gleam of surgical scissors just in case. But the most difficult moment came when she had to enter the nursery. Emma's blankets, still wrapped in their delicate tissue paper, a soft swirl of pink and white, forever unused. Sarah's hands trembled as she lifted them. "I'm so sorry, my baby girl," she whispered towards the vacant crib. "But someone needs these now." By 5:45, the first puppy was making its way into the world. Sarah had delivered human babies under far worse conditions, but she had never been so utterly alone, never with a heart so completely exposed. The puppy arrived in a sudden surge of fluid, a little male, as dark as his mother, squirming with a fierce will to live. Hope began her work immediately, cleaning him with an innate efficiency, an instinct far older than time itself. Sarah gently cleared the tiny puppy's airways, her trained hands checking for any imperfections, finding none. He was absolutely perfect. The second and third puppies followed in quick succession, both of them females, tinier than their brother, yet undeniably resilient. A constant stream of words flowed from Sarah, a balm for Hope's distress, and a desperate attempt to fill the suffocating silence that had been her own prison for months. "You're doing so wonderfully, Mama. So brave. Just look at your beautiful babies." Her hands moved with an instinct she thought she'd lost, recalling how to check for a breach, how to coax a first breath, how to ensure the afterbirth was fully delivered. Just as the storm raged with new fury, the fourth puppy began to emerge wrong breech bottom first. Panic seized Sarah's heart. She had no proper tools, no one to help. This could all go horribly wrong. She met Hope's gaze, and in it, she found nothing but absolute, unwavering trust. "All right, sweet girl. This is going to be difficult, but you have to trust me now." Sarah's hands gently guided the tiny pup, employing techniques from a past life in emergency obstetrics. The dog never once snapped, never recoiled, despite the agony she must have felt. 10 agonizing minutes of careful work passed. Then the fourth puppy, another little male, finally came free. But he was still, not breathing. Sarah acted instantly, clearing his airways, rubbing his minuscule body with a desperate vigor, even pressing gently on his chest with 2 fingers. "Come on, little fighter, please come on." Suddenly, a tiny gasp, a cough, a faint cry filled the air. Hope's tail gave a weak thump as she began to clean her son. The fifth puppy arrived easily, but Sarah could feel the life draining from Hope. Her breathing grew shallow and labored. Her strength was fading fast. "Just one more, Mama. I can feel one more." 7 o'clock brought a new crisis. The sixth puppy wasn't just breech. It was lifeless. Sarah delivered the tiny male, the smallest of them all. His little body, blue and still. She could find no heartbeat. "No," Sarah whispered, her voice shattering with the word. The room began to spin, and she was suddenly back in that sterile hospital room, watching the monitors flatline, hearing the doctor's hollow words. "Your baby's heart has stopped." The front door creaked open without a sound. Walter Hayes was standing there, his weathered face absorbing the entire desperate scene in a single glance. "Heard the struggle through the walls," he said, his voice rough but unexpectedly kind. "I know that sound, Nurse Mitchell. That's the sound of someone fighting for a life." Without waiting for an invitation, Walter knelt beside her, his old hands remarkably steady. "I delivered babies in Vietnam," he confided, his voice barely a whisper. "In camps in the belly of helicopters, in places God never meant for a new life to start. What is it you need?" "He's not breathing," Sarah answered, her voice an empty, hollow sound. "The last one, he's not." "Then we make him breathe," Walter stated with a calm finality. He seamlessly took over compressions as Sarah worked to clear the puppy's airway. 1 agonizing minute passed. Then 2. Sarah was weeping uncontrollably now, completely unaware of her own tears. "Please," she pleaded to whatever Grace might be listening. "I couldn't save Emma. Please let me save this one. Please." Walter's compressions never wavered. His lips moved in a silent plea that might have been a prayer. The first he had uttered since his son's flag-draped casket was carried home from Afghanistan. The storm outside howled to its climax, lightning illuminating the shadowed room in stark, blinding flashes. Hope whined desperately, trying to reach her lifeless puppy. Then so faint Sarah thought she'd dreamt it. The smallest gasp, a fragile wheeze, and then a true miracle, a weak but undeniable cry for life. In his 68 years, Walter Hayes had seen death in its many guises. In the sweltering jungles of Vietnam, it struck silent and swift. As his wife Margaret battled cancer, it came slowly, a thief stealing pieces of her day by day. When the Marines stood on his porch to talk about his son, Tommy Death wore dress blues and spoke in practiced, hollow condolences. But here, kneeling on Sarah Mitchell's living room floor at 7:30 in the morning, he witnessed something else entirely. He saw death being defied by 2 broken people who refused to let go. The tiny puppy in Sarah's hands was breathing, but just barely. Each breath was a monumental effort, a conscious struggle to remain in this world. Walter recognized that look in Sarah's eyes too. He'd seen it in field hospitals on the faces of medics, who had pushed beyond exhaustion into a sacred space where only willpower keeps a person moving. "That's it, little warrior," Walter murmured, his massive hands impossibly gentle as he continued to stimulate the puppy's circulation. "You fight. Your mama needs you to fight." Sarah finally looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I know it isn't rational. He's just a dog, but—" "Stop," Walter interrupted firmly. "Nothing about life and death is ever rational. That little one is fighting for the very reason any of us do, because some force in this universe insists he belongs here. And at this very moment, Nurse Mitchell, you are his entire world." The pup, smaller than all his siblings and marked by a distinct white star on his chest, wasn't opening his eyes. While his breathing had finally steadied, his eyelids remained fused together. This wasn't the natural seal of a newborn puppy, but something profoundly different. Sarah's trained hands gently assessed him, her clinical mind recognizing the subtle, devastating signs. "He's blind," she whispered, the diagnosis heavy in the air. "A congenital defect, most likely. He is never going to see." A faint, knowing smile etched itself onto Walter's weathered face. My Tommy was colorblind, couldn't distinguish red from green. Still, he became the sharpest shooter in his entire unit. He always said he learned to perceive things others overlooked, simply because he was forced to look more intently. His voice fractured just slightly. "The broken ones often see with the most clarity, Sarah. They just perceive a different reality." All the while, Hope had been observing, and now she began a deliberate, careful approach toward her smallest child. There was none of the anxious licking she'd bestowed upon the others. Instead, she simply laid her massive head beside him, her warm breath blanketing his fragile form. Then she met Sarah's gaze and let out a sound. It wasn't a bark, nor was it a whine. It was something else, something with purpose. "She's trying to tell you something," Walter murmured. "Dogs have a sense about these things. Trust her." Yielding, Sarah tenderly guided the sightless puppy toward Hope's warm belly, where he instantly began to root for a nipple, his lack of sight no obstacle to his primal need for life. Hope's tail gave a single faint thump, and she looked at Sarah with amber eyes that seemed to hold an ancient wisdom. "Little fighter," Sarah breathed. "That's exactly what you are." By 8:30, word of the ordeal had somehow rippled through the neighborhood. Sarah never intended for it to go public, but she had uploaded a single photograph to Facebook of Hope nursing her puppies, along with the caption, "A miracle on my doorstep this morning." She had only thought that maybe Rachel would see it. She never imagined it would detonate. Mrs. Henderson from across the street was the first to appear, her arms laden with a box of crucial supplies, old towels, a heating pad, and some puppy formula she had kept from years ago when her daughter used to breed dogs. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice full of warmth as she took in Sarah's exhausted face. "What you have done here, it is a beautiful thing." But this sentiment was not shared by everyone. At precisely 9 o'clock, Marcus Webb, the president of the Homeowners Association, appeared, his face a tight mask of disapproval. "Miss Mitchell," he began, his tone cold, "I must inform you that harboring 7 dogs on a residential property is a flagrant violation of our community's established guidelines. You are required to contact animal control immediately." "Are you even serious right now?" Walter positioned himself between Marcus and the doorway. "This woman just saved 7 precious lives." "The rules are the rules," Marcus retorted stiffly. "We have standards to maintain." "Standards," Walter echoed, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Let me tell you about standards. The standard of human decency dictates that you help when someone is in desperate need. The standard of compassion says you don't strike a person who is already broken. And the standard of being a neighbor says you either offer your help or you get the hell off her property." Marcus finally retreated, but not before capturing photos with his phone. "The board will be hearing about this." More neighbors emerged as the morning wore on, some offering support with food and supplies, while others whispered their clear disapproval, murmuring about property values and health ordinances. Sarah was lost to it all. Her world had shrunk to Hope, and her puppies obsessively checking on each fragile life, ensuring they were nursing that they were safe. Then, a gleaming Mercedes pulled up. Sarah's stomach lurched as she recognized it. Karen Mitchell, David's new wife. Karen didn't emerge, simply sat capturing pictures through her windshield, her perfectly manicured nails tapping on her phone screen, texting David undoubtedly. At 10 o'clock, Sarah finally called Rachel. Her friend was there. Within 15 minutes, veterinary bag in hand, her fiery red hair twisted into the messy bun that meant she had dropped everything to come. "Sarah, honey, what in the world is—" Rachel stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. "Oh my God." For the next hour, Rachel conducted a meticulous examination of Hope and all 6 of her puppies. She carefully cleaned and dressed Hope's wound, administered a course of antibiotics, and checked the vital signs of each tiny pup. Her professional expression grew increasingly solemn as she examined Hope more closely. "Sarah, this dog has old injuries, multiple fractures that healed incorrectly, and what looked like burn marks on her paws. These weren't accidents. This is abuse." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, a silent gasp escaping. "Who could do something like that to a pregnant dog?" "I'm scanning for a microchip," Rachel stated. She moved her portable scanner over Hope's shoulder, and a sharp beep sliced through the tense silence. "She has a chip. It's registered to St. Mary's Orphanage, but that's 20 miles away from here." Rachel brought up the registration on her tablet. "She's listed as a therapy dog named Hope, reported missing 2 months ago." She looked up at Sarah. "This dog traveled 20 miles injured and pregnant to find your door. That is not an accident. Sarah, that's a calling. We have to contact the orphanage," Sarah urged. "We will, but first things first. These puppies need names for my official records." Sarah hesitated. Naming them would make them real and make the loss unbearable when they had to go. But gazing at each fragile life she'd helped into the world, she couldn't bring herself to call them just numbers. The firstborn is Bear. He's the strongest. The 2 females are Luna and Daisy. The 4th male is Scout. The 5th is Tucker. She paused, her eyes lingering on the smallest, the blind puppy still fighting so hard to nurse. "And the little one, we'll call him Miracle." Rachel offered a sad smile. "Perfect names. Now about Hope. She's severely malnourished on top of it all. She'll need specialized food, continued antibiotics, and absolute rest. This is going to be costly." "Sarah, I can help with the expenses." "I'll manage," Sarah said, her tone resolute. "I have savings. Your emergency fund," Rachel said softly. "Sarah, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." Sarah's voice was firm. For the first time in 8 long months, "I have to do something. I have to matter to someone, even if it's just for a little while." That evening, long after Rachel had left and Walter had gone home with a promise to return at dawn, Sarah sat in the quiet with Hope and her puppies. The house, achingly silent for so long, was now filled with the faintest sounds of life. Hope's contented sighs, the occasional tiny squeak of protest when one hungry pup pushed another aside. Sarah had moved her own pillow and blanket to the living room floor. She couldn't bear the thought of leaving them alone, and Hope seemed to draw comfort from her presence. As darkness enveloped the room, Sarah found herself confiding in the weary mother. "I lost my daughter," she whispered into the stillness. "Emma, well, she would have been born next month. I had everything prepared, her name, her room, her whole future." David said it was my fault. Maybe it was. Maybe my body just isn't made to hold on to life. Hope lifted her head, and with a visible struggle, shifted closer to Sarah, her massive head settling into Sarah's lap with a profound weight of trust. "But you," Sarah whispered, her fingers tracing the soft velvet of Hope's ears. "You endured, didn't you? Through an unimaginable darkness, you somehow held on. You fought to stay alive. And when you couldn't fight alone anymore, you found me. And maybe, just maybe, I needed you to find me just as much." That night, for the first time since Emma was gone, the bottle of sleeping pills on her nightstand remained untouched. She didn't need the escape. She had a purpose now. Tiny, fragile lives were depending on her. At 2 a.m, a faint, desperate whimper broke the silence. Miracle, the smallest one, was struggling lost among his much larger siblings. Sarah was there in an instant, gently guiding him toward the warmth of Hope's belly. At 4, when Hope stirred thirsty, Sarah was ready with a bowl of fresh water. At 5, when a chorus of tiny squeaks signaled a new wave of hunger, and Hope was simply too drained to respond right away. Sarah was already prepared with the supplemental formula Rachel had provided. Sleep was a distant memory, but for the first time in months, she wasn't drowning in her sorrow. She had a purpose. She was essential. And in this quiet, sacred space, she was in some small but profound way a mother once more. The dawn of the second day brought with it a cadence Sarah's heart had nearly forgotten the rhythm of being needed. She didn't wake from the grip of nightmares, but to the gentle chorus of hungry puppies. Hope raised her head, a flicker of clarity in her amber eyes that hadn't been there the day before. Watching as Sarah moved with quiet efficiency, preparing fresh water and the special food Rachel had prescribed. The frantic desperation in the dog's gaze was softening into trust, though a shadow of fear still made her flinch at any sudden movement. "Good morning, Mama." Sarah whispered, her voice a gentle caress, as she inspected Hope's wound. The medicine was winning the battle. The angry, inflamed red was surrendering to a soft, healing pink. "Let's get some food in you first. Then we'll see to your little ones." She had already constructed a meticulous medical chart for each tiny life, a detail that struck Walter as both deeply heartbreaking and profoundly hopeful when he arrived at 7, with supplies and his thermos of coffee. "You're treating them like tiny patients," he murmured, his eyes tracing the careful columns she'd made for weight-feeding times and behaviors. "They are," Sarah answered softly, her focus entirely on Scout, who had begun to make a faint wheezing sound. "Each one is a unique battle. Miracle most of all. He has to fight twice as hard as the others for every single breath, every single meal." Walter stood by, watching her tenderly supplement Miracle's nursing with a bottle, the sightless puppy's small paws instinctively kneading the air as he fed. "You realize you're growing attached," he murmured softly. "I know," Sarah confessed, her gaze never leaving the fragile life in her hands. But perhaps she thought that wasn't the worst fate she could imagine. By the third day, the story had blazed through Willow Creek like a wildfire across a parched landscape. Sarah's one solitary social media post had been shared over 10,000 times, igniting a firestorm of comments that swung from heartfelt encouragement to cutting, cruel attacks. "Just another bleeding heart trying to play savior," one bitter comment declared. "She probably faked the entire situation just for the attention." Another cynic chimed in. But in defiance, Mrs. Henderson had sparked a counter-movement rallying neighbors to leave needed supplies on Sarah's doorstep. "That poor girl has been like a ghost for 8 long months," she would tell anyone who would listen. "Now she finally has a purpose again. And if you can't recognize the profound beauty in that, then you are the one who is truly lost." But all the while, Marcus Webb was meticulously constructing his case. He documented each visitor, photographed every perceived infraction, and was compiling a formal complaint for the HOA board. 7 dogs in a residential zone, he declared to his wife over dinner. "It's completely unsanitary, it's against the law, and it establishes a dangerous precedent." Then on the 4th day, the local news station caught wind of the story. A reporter and a cameraman materialized on her doorstep, hungry for an uplifting rescue feature. Sarah, utterly drained and overwhelmed, was on the verge of turning them away. But Walter intervened. "Just tell them your truth," he urged her. "Let the world see what real compassion looks like. Lord knows this world is starved for it." The interview itself was brief, featuring Sarah in a stained t-shirt, her hair pulled back, hastily cradling Miracle, as Hope stood guard with a watchful, protective gaze. "She chose my door," Sarah stated plainly to the camera. "I have no idea why, but she chose me. How could I possibly deny a mother who was begging for help?" The segment ran that very evening on the 6 o'clock news. David Mitchell saw it all from his corner office at Mitchell Barnes and Associates. His jaw clenched so hard his teeth began to ache. Karen had already sent him 3 urgent texts. "Your ex-wife is making a spectacle of herself on the news. This is humiliating. Fix it." That night, for For the first time, David found himself driving past Sarah's house. It was a slow, deliberate crawl designed to look like nothing at all. But he saw it, the soft glow of lights, the flicker of shadows dancing within. He could hear the sound of dogs, a faint echo of his own dog's bark. His knuckles went white, gripping the steering wheel as the memory of day 5 flooded back. By then, Sarah had forged a new reality, a routine that became the very architecture for her shapeless days. It began at 500 in the morning with the quiet ritual of feeding. 7 a.m. was for tending to Hope's wounds. At 8 a.m., she meticulously examined each tiny puppy. Walter's arrival at 7:30 had become a comforting constant. He brought coffee and sat with Hope, a silent guardian, during the only moments Sarah allowed herself to step away and stand under the healing spray of a hot shower. Rachel would stop by each evening after her clinic closed, her presence a calming force as she checked vitals and carefully adjusted medications. "Hope is gaining weight," Rachel announced on the 6th day, her voice a beacon of light. "Her wounds are healing beautifully. And the puppies, Sarah? They're thriving. Even little Miracle. His progress is slower, but he's a fighter." "Just like his mom," Sarah whispered, her hand gently stroking Hope's head. The noble German shepherd had become her shadow, following her from room to room whenever she wasn't nursing, her powerful tail sweeping the floor with every word Sarah spoke. "Have you contacted the orphanage yet?" Rachel's question cut through the peaceful moment. Sarah's headshake was barely perceptible. "I'm terrified," she confessed. "What if they demand her back right away, the puppies? They haven't even been weaned. And Hope? She's only just now beginning to believe in kindness again." "You have to call them Sarah. Eventually." "I know," she choked out. "Just not yet." The 7th day arrived with a development no one could have foreseen. Sarah's post on social media had ignited, spreading like a wildfire she could no longer control. Her original post now had 50,000 shares, and a torrent of messages flooded her inbox from every corner of the country. Many offered support and donations, but others were laced with venom, accusing her of everything from animal hoarding to outright fraud. Then there was one message, one that pierced through the noise. It was from a Sister Catherine at St. Mary's Orphanage. "Dear Miss Mitchell, we believe the dog in your viral post is our therapy dog, Hope. She vanished 2 months ago. There is a child here who is desperate to know that she is safe. Please contact me with the utmost urgency." Sarah's hands trembled so violently she could barely type her reply, her fingers fumbling to explain Hope's fragile condition, the birth of the puppies, everything. Not even an hour later, her phone rang. It was Sister Catherine. "Miss Mitchell, I cannot begin to express what your message means to us, and to one child in particular. Her name is Lily Chen. She is 8 years old, and she has not spoken a single word since the day Hope disappeared." Sarah listened, her heart aching, as Sister Catherine recounted Lily's harrowing story, the inferno that had claimed her parents, the chilling silence of selective mutism that followed, and the sheer miracle of Hope's arrival at the orphanage. And then the cruel theft of the dog sold for cash to a dishonest employee. "We filed a police report, but there was no evidence of who took her." Sister Catherine's voice trailed into sorrow. "Lily has been wasting away ever since. She refuses to eat. She won't interact with anyone. Hope was her voice, her very connection to this world. Could you bring her to see Hope?" The words rushed out of Sarah. "I was hoping you would ask." Tomorrow day 8 would change everything. Sarah had spent the entire morning preparing, cleaning with a nervous intensity, whispering to Hope that someone special was coming. She couldn't know if the dog understood, but Hope seemed unusually alert, her ears twitching at every sound. At 2 o'clock, Sister Catherine's car rolled into the driveway. Sarah watched from the window as a tiny girl emerged, so thin, she seemed fragile, with long dark hair hiding her face. She moved with the deliberate caution of someone who knew the world could shatter in an instant. The moment Lily saw Hope through the screen door, her entire being transformed. She ran a true and desperate run, pressing her hands against the mesh, tears carving paths down her face. Hope's reaction was even more staggering. The dog, who'd barely possessed the energy to stand days ago, fought her way to her feet, her tail wagging so violently her whole body shook, crying in a way Sarah had never heard. Sarah unlatched the door, and Lily collapsed to her knees. Hope was on her in a heartbeat, pressing close, licking her face, making soft, pleading noises that sounded like they were forming words. Lily's hands flew in a flurry of rapid signs, a secret language Sarah couldn't comprehend, but Hope understood it innately, responding with deliberate movements of her head and paws. "They're talking," Sister Catherine whispered, her eyes shining with tears. "Lily invented her own sign language just for Hope. We never fully understood it, but Hope always did." For 20 minutes, the child and her dog were locked in conversation. Lily's signs grew increasingly animated as Hope answered with a chorus of barks, whines, and knowing gestures. Then Lily saw the puppies. Her eyes widened in pure wonder. She looked up at Sarah for the very first time, her small hand pointing towards the litter, and then to Hope, her expression a silent, heartbreaking question. "Yes," Sarah's voice was a gentle whisper. "Hope has babies. 6 of them. Would you care to meet them?" Lily's nod was immediate, a flicker of life in her eyes before she made a specific sign to Hope, emotion, like cradling something precious. Hope, with profound care, led her to the nest where the puppies slept. One by one, Sarah made the introductions, saving a tiny soul named Miracle for the very end. "This one, he's different," Sarah explained gently, placing the sightless puppy into Lily's lap. "He cannot see, but he possesses the fiercest spirit of all. He's had to fight for his life more than the others." A profound shift washed over Lily as she held Miracle. Her gaze darted from Sarah to Sister Catherine, her lips parting and closing a silent, desperate struggle to find a voice long abandoned. And then, in a tone so fragile it was barely a breath rusted from 2 months of disuse, she whispered, "Like me." Sister Catherine gasped, a hand flying to her chest. Sarah felt her own heart stop. Hope's tail thumped a frantic rhythm, and she tenderly licked Lily's hand, as if to say, "You did it." From that moment on, Lily's visits became a daily pilgrimage. The orphanage was relieved to find a place for her to heal, a sanctuary that understood broken things. She would sit for hours with Hope and the puppies, drawn especially to Miracle, teaching him a silent language of touch that only they could share. Slowly, so slowly, she began to speak again, a single word at first, then a short phrase always directed to the dogs, never to a human soul. The 10th day brought a new kind of darkness. The HOA meeting had been set, and Marcus Webb had meticulously prepared his attack. He had armed himself with city ordinances, health codes, and animal control statutes. He presented statements from disapproving neighbors, documenting every possible infraction. "Miss Mitchell is running an illegal animal shelter," he announced to the board, his voice ringing with triumph. 7 dogs in a residential home violates Code 231.5. The noise shatters the peace. The health hazards are undeniable. Our property values are plummeting. Sarah arrived flanked by Walter and Rachel, ready for the fight. She had her defense prepared, but Marcus revealed an unexpected weapon, an ally she never saw coming, Karen Mitchell, who took the stand claiming to be a concerned neighbor, though she lived a full 3 streets away. "I've witnessed the utter chaos this has brought," Karen declared, her voice rehearsed and sharp. The endless stream of cars, the glaring eyes of the media. It has transformed our quiet neighborhood into a spectacle, and quite frankly, considering Miss Mitchell's recent emotional difficulties, I seriously question if she is truly capable of providing proper care for these animals. The verbal strike was perfectly calculated. A public dagger aimed at Sarah's raw grief. yet veiled just enough to deny any malicious intent. Sarah felt the steadying pressure of Walter's hand on her shoulder, an anchor in the storm. Then Rachel rose to her feet to counter the attack. "I am a licensed veterinarian," she began, "and I can state unequivocally that these animals are receiving the most excellent care. In fact, it is better care than I witness for many pets in my own practice. Miss Mitchell has created meticulous medical charts and maintains a rigid feeding schedule, and she has poured her own savings into their medical needs." "That's beside the point," Marcus cut in abruptly. "The rules are the rules. Actually," a soft voice emerged from the back of the room, "compassion is the point." Every head turned to see Lily Chen standing there in the doorway. Sister Catherine stood just behind her. The small girl who had not uttered a word in public for 2 long years slowly walked to the front of the room, her chin held high, a stark contrast to her trembling hands. "Hope is my dog." She managed each word a battle, yet perfectly clear. "She saved me after my parents were gone. She was stolen from me, sold to a bad man, but then she found Miss Sarah so she could save the babies. And save me too." A profound silence fell over the room. Even Marcus appeared visibly stunned. "Miss Sarah," Lily went on, her gaze now fixed on Sarah's. "She is like Hope. She saves broken things like me. She is a miracle. Please, don't take our family away." In the aftermath of her words, the vote was officially postponed for further review. But an undeniable shift had occurred in that room. Several board members were discreetly wiping tears from their eyes. Karen Mitchell made a swift exit, the sharp, angry click of her heels echoing on the tile. Days 12 through 15 brought a new escalating tension. David had started driving past her house with unnerving regularity, always slowly and always at unpredictable times. He never left a trace, never made contact. But Sarah recognized that specific Mercedes instantly, and the very specific, agitated rhythm he would tap his fingers on the steering wheel when he was disturbed. Then, one morning, she found a note tucked beneath her windshield wiper. "Some people never learn their limitations." It was unmistakably David's handwriting, though unsigned. The next day another. "Remember what happened last time you tried to play mother?" Sarah kept the notes a secret, terrified they would be twisted into proof of her own instability. Ammunition for anyone who wanted Hope and her puppies gone. But Walter saw the change in her, the constant glances toward the windows, the way she flinched at the sound of every passing car. "What is it, Sarah?" he asked gently on the 14th day. "It's nothing. I'm just tired." Walter's gaze sharpened. "I know what scared looks like. This is something else entirely. Someone's been bothering you." But before she could form a reply, Hope began to growl, a deep rumble, unlike any sound Sarah had ever heard her make. Her eyes followed Hope's stare out the window, and there it was, David's Mercedes idling at the curb. Hope's fur stood on end, her lips curling back to reveal her teeth, even while still mending from her ordeal. She was the very picture of danger. "She recognizes that car," Walter murmured, his voice low. "Or the man inside it." The car finally drove off, but a profound agitation gripped Hope for hours, forcing her to pace despite her deep exhaustion, always positioning her body between her puppies and the door. It wasn't until Lily arrived for her afternoon visit that a fragile calm returned, for she sensed the disturbance in the air at once. She signed quickly to Hope, then turned to Sarah, her eyes wide with fear. "Bad man," she whispered. "Hope says the bad man was here." That very evening, Rachel came over to help Sarah install security cameras, a system Sarah knew she couldn't afford, but now couldn't possibly live without. "You need to file a police report about those notes," Rachel insisted. "And say what he's a lawyer. He understands exactly how to threaten someone without leaving a shred of evidence. Then we protect ourselves," Rachel declared, her voice firm. "I'll start spending some nights here. Walter is already planning to come by more often." "You are not going through this alone, Sarah." By the 15th day, The puppy's eyes had begun to slowly open, all except for little miracles which would never see the light of day. And yet something truly remarkable was happening with him. Whenever Lily held him, he would turn his small head toward any sound with an almost unnatural accuracy. When she felt sad, he would press his body against her before the first tear fell. It was as though his lack of sight had profoundly sharpened his other senses. It made him sensitive to emotions in a way his sighted siblings could never be. "He sees with his heart," Lily confided in Sarah one afternoon, the longest sentence she had managed to speak. "Just like Hope sees me, like how you saw that Hope needed help." Sarah gazed at this wounded child clutching this imperfect puppy, realizing they were mending each other in ways science could never fathom, and wondered if this was the true meaning of family. It wasn't about bloodlines or perfection, but the profound choice to find the beauty in things that were broken and love them back to wholeness. Their story had now traveled far beyond the confines of Willow Creek. Donations began pouring in daily bags of dog food, warm blankets, and even checks from strangers deeply moved by the tale of a pregnant dog who sought refuge at a stranger's door and changed so many lives. But for every ounce of support, an equal measure of opposition arose. Animal rights activists demanded to know why Hope wasn't immediately sent back to the orphanage. Others hurled accusations that Sarah was exploiting the situation, using the dogs for attention and personal profit. Marcus Webb scheduled another HOA meeting for day 20, promising decisive action. David's menacing drive-bys became more frequent. The notes grew more constant, their tone more threatening. "You failed once, you'll fail again." Karen launched a petition demanding animal control's intervention, gathering signatures from anyone who would entertain her fears about public health and safety. But within the walls of Sarah's small house, something truly beautiful was taking root. Hope was healing her body, growing stronger, her shattered trust in humans slowly being pieced back together. The puppies were thriving, each one's unique personality starting to shine through. And most miraculously, Lily was speaking more each day, her voice gaining confidence as she read stories to the little ones, sang quiet lullabies to Miracle, and shared memories of her days at the orphanage. "You brought her back to me," she whispered to Sarah one evening, as dusk painted the living room in soft colors. "And Hope brought me to you. We're supposed to be a family." Sarah pulled the little girl into a hug, feeling small arms wrap around her neck for the very first time. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered back. "We are supposed to be together." She couldn't know what day 20 would bring. She had no idea how she could possibly fight against David's money and power, Marcus's iron-fisted regulations, or Karen's cruel and vengeful campaign. But holding Lily close with Hope watching over them, and 6 puppies tumbling in a joyful heap, Sarah knew deep in her soul that she would fight for them with every last fiber of her being, because she had learned that sometimes salvation pads into your life on 4 paws at 5 in the morning. There are times when a family isn't born of design, but from a desperate intervention. And sometimes it's the broken who piece each other back together, forging something truly whole from the scattered fragments of their lives. A storm was gathering on the horizon, but for this one night, inside this small house now brimming with an unexpected love, they had found a sanctuary. They were together. They were home. Day 20 dawned under a suffocating heat so intense the Texas air seemed to shimmer and warp. Sarah had been tossing and turning since 4 a.m., unable to quiet the cold premonition that something was about to break. Hope sensed it too. The dog paced her healing body, tense her ears, pivoting toward phantom sounds only she could perceive. The puppies, now 2 weeks old, and just beginning to sense their world huddled together in an anxious cluster. At 7 o'clock sharp, the Mercedes turned into Sarah's driveway. Not slowing, not passing, but pulling directly in a deliberate act to block her car. David Mitchell emerged in his $1,000 suit, clutching a leather briefcase. He was the very picture of a legal predator who had never lost a battle that truly mattered to him. But Sarah, peering through the window, saw the truth in his rigid posture, a barely contained violence in the way he slammed the car door, the white-knuckled grip on his briefcase handle that betrayed his rage. Before she could even fully form the thought to call for help, he was on her doorstep, his knock not a request, but a command. The sharp rap of a man who demanded to be obeyed. Hope's reaction was instantaneous and primal. The dog who had remained gentle, even through unimaginable agony, now stood frozen, a low, menacing growl rumbling up from the depths of her chest. Her lips curled back, exposing teeth that suddenly looked capable of inflicting terrible damage. "Sarah, open this door." David's voice sliced through the wood, draped in a chilling and thin veneer of civility. "We need to resolve this matter with the dog like two civilized adults." Sarah's hands trembled as she approached the door, but she refused to open it. "There is nothing to discuss, David. Please, just leave." "Actually," he countered, his tone sharp, "there is." She heard the ominous rustle of papers. "I am holding a legally binding bill of sale for one German shepherd purchased 2 months ago from the St. Mary's orphanage. That animal is my property and you are guilty of theft." The words weren't just spoken. They were weapons striking Sarah with the force of a physical assault. But it was Hope's reaction that truly terrified her. The dog was retreating from the door, her whole body shaking not with anger, but with the ghost of a past horror. She stood guard before the puppy box, her legs shaking so terribly she could scarcely remain standing. "That's impossible," Sarah breathed. "Hope was stolen from the orphanage. She's a therapy dog." David laughed, that same cold, chilling sound from the divorce proceedings. "I have paperwork that says otherwise. Now open this door, or I'll have the police do it for me." At that very moment, a small voice rose up from behind Sarah. "No." Lily Chen stood in the hallway, having arrived a little early with Sister Catherine for her morning visit. The 8-year-old girl who so rarely spoke was now marching toward the door with absolute determination, her small hands clenched into fists. "Lily, my dear, please stay back," Sarah began, but Lily firmly shook her head. "I know him," Lily said, her voice stronger than Sarah had ever heard it before. "I know his voice. He's the bad man that hurt Hope." David's tone changed, becoming harder. "You need to control that kid, Sarah. Defamation from a minor is still actionable." Sister Catherine stepped forward, her nun's habit paradoxically making her seem more formidable rather than less. "You must be Mr. Mitchell. I am Sister Catherine from St. Mary's. Any sale of Hope would have had to go through me, and I can assure you no such lawful transaction occurred. I have the paperwork right here." David insisted, his control clearly slipping. "It's signed by a Michael Torres, an employee of St. Mary S. Michael Torres was fired 6 weeks ago for theft," Sister Catherine replied coolly. "Any sale he conducted was illegitimate. That dog was stolen property." The door shuddered as David struck it with his fist. "Open this door. That's my dog and I will take what's mine." Hope was now shaking so uncontrollably that Sarah feared she would simply collapse. The dog's eyes were wide with pure panic, foam flecking the corners of her mouth. But even in her overwhelming terror, she did not budge from her post in front of her puppies. Lily suddenly ran to Hope, falling to her knees beside the trembling dog. Her hands moved in a flurry of rapid signs, and she began to speak, translating her own gestures aloud. "Hope says he put her in the dark place, the garage. When her cries filled the air, there was no food. When she attempted to flee, the stick met her skin. Her only escape came the one time he neglected to secure the chain." "That child is clueless," David raged. And with those words, the carefully constructed facade shattered completely. The front door swung inward, but it wasn't Sarah standing in the threshold. It was Walter Hayes, a formidable 6'2" of solid presence. His marine posture made him seem impossibly larger. "Care to repeat that, counselor?" His voice was a low, dangerous whisper. "Do you want to call that little girl that name one more time?" David flinched backward, a flicker of fear in his eyes before his arrogance returned. "You are trespassing on my ex-wife's property. I'll have you arrested." "For being invited in by the homeowner?" Walter shifted, revealing Sister Catherine and Lily. "Or is it for protecting a child?" and a wounded animal from a monster. By all means, counselor, make that call. David's face flooded with a dark, furious red. That dog is my legal property. Papers you acquired through deceit, Sister Catherine interjected, her voice cutting through his rage. That is a matter for a judge. In the meantime, I'm taking what's mine. David lunged past Walter, but it was like hitting a wall of granite. The older man stood firm. Son, I have faced down far better men than you in hells you can't imagine. You are not coming through this door. The world seemed to slow to a crawl. David swung his heavy briefcase, a vicious arc aimed directly at Walter's head, targeting the man's vulnerable shoulder, the same shoulder that still held pieces of shrapnel from Vietnam. But Walter had seen the attack coming. With his left arm, he parried the briefcase, and his right hand snapped out, seizing David's wrist, a fluid, practiced motion born from 1,000 battlefields long ago. Assault! David shrieked, his voice cracking. You're all witnesses, he assaulted me. We witnessed you throwing the first blow, Sister Catherine stated with unnerving calm, her phone already held high, capturing every moment. David tore his arm free and frantically retrieved his own phone. I'm calling the cops. Every single one of you is going to jail for theft, for assault, for harboring stolen property. Oh, please do. A new voice cut in from behind him. It was Rachel. She had just arrived for her morning check-in and now stood resolutely in the driveway. Her own phone was up its lens, silently recording everything. I imagine they'll be fascinated by the security footage from Sarah's new cameras. The footage of you hurling rocks at her house just last week. David whipped around his face a mask of pure shock. You don't actually have any proof. Mrs. Henderson's voice cut through the tension from across the street. And it seems you're quite mistaken. She isn't the only one with cameras. The elderly woman stood firm on her porch, a tablet clutched in her hand. It's truly astonishing what these modern doorbell cameras manage to capture these days. For instance, someone in a Mercedes, leaving threatening notes on cars, on several different occasions. More neighbors were gathering now, drawn by the undeniable commotion. Phones emerged, their lenses recording. David was encircled. His meticulously controlled world was shattering around him. Lily continued to translate Hope's silent language, her own voice rising with a chilling clarity. He hurt her when she was carrying her babies. She was so hungry she had to eat grass. He said horrible things about Miss Sarah, that she lost her baby and that he'd make sure Hope lost hers, too. Sarah gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. Those were the precise venomous words David had spat at her in the privacy of their darkest arguments. How could Hope possibly convey that? But watching Lily's intense focus on Hope's deliberate, pained movements, she realized with a cold certainty the child was not imagining this. Through their profound and unique bond, the unvarnished truth was being told. Enough! David roared, his voice cracking. He pulled something from his jacket, not a weapon but a collapsed walking stick. With a sharp flick of his wrist, it telescoped to its full length, and Hope's reaction was nothing short of explosive. She let out a howl of pure, soul-shattering terror and tried to scramble beneath the coffee table, a space she was now far too large to fit. Her puppies, sensing the wave of their mother's fear, began to cry in a heartbreaking unison. "That's the stick!" Lily screamed, her small finger pointing like an accusation. "That is what he hit her with. Look, just look at her leg." And suddenly, everyone saw it. The way Hope cowered so specifically from that single object. The way the faint marks on her injured leg seemed to perfectly match its width. The very same dog who had stood bravely between her puppies and any threat was now reduced to a trembling wreck by the mere sight of David's cane. "This proves absolutely nothing," David stammered, but all conviction had fled his voice. "A dog being scared doesn't mean, Mr. Mitchell." A new voice, authoritative and unwavering, cut him off. Two police officers now stood